It's the Worth Knowing live stream, and we're on the Cliff's Edge channel on YouTube. My very own Substack, Worth Knowing, with Matt Robeson. I'm the Matt Robeson. And Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn. Yes, we are extremely visible everywhere, which is more than we can say for the President of the United States, Donald Trump, over the past week, who mysteriously went into hiding for 5 or 6 days, only to reemerge today, at least he's supposed to right now, like some malignant groundhog. Is it too much to ask that he sees his own shadow and goes back underground? We may never find out exactly why Trump disappeared from public view for almost a week, but here's a thought exercise. Could it be that he went into goblin mode out of a sense of shame? As shown in the thumbnail for today's show, which you can see if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, or best of all, if you're joining through my Substack, Worth Knowing with Matt Robeson, that's worthknowing.substack.com. Over the weekend, Trump was subject to a very public ostracizing by the leaders of 3 of the world's major powers. At this weekend's Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Tianjin, Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and Narendra Modi, the leaders of China, Russia, and India, respectively, got together for a 3-way handshake and backslap session designed explicitly to give Trump a galactic level of FOMO. It would be like 2 of your exes getting into a 3-way makeout session with your biggest rival and posting a video clip on your Instagram. Now, obviously, this was performative. It was done for the benefit of the camera, and there wasn't a ton of substance here, but there was an awful lot of symbolism. And the symbol was a gigantic middle finger to America, and most specifically to the leader of the United States of America. And that has got to hurt, because we're barely 2 weeks past Trump literally rolling out the red carpet, literally putting American soldiers on hands and knees, prostrate before the Russians. Seriously, look up the image. 2 weeks since Trump allowed himself to be sock puppeted by Vladimir Putin. And no, I won't say literally to that, but yes, it was about as invasive as it sounds. And yet Trump has gotten exactly 0 out of all of that bootlicking. His first deadline for Putin to make progress on peace talks with Ukraine passed yesterday with absolutely nothing changing. His second extended 2-week deadline is now on the verge of lapsing with, again, nothing to show. In fact, Trump has gotten worse than nothing. What he got was the 3-way smooch in his face over the weekend. And that moment was a perfect encapsulation of Trump's self-inflicted wounds. Modi was bro-hugging Putin and Jinping because Trump slapped massive tariffs on India under the very flimsy excuse that India was buying oil from Russia in violation of sanctions meant to punish Russia for their war against Ukraine. Seriously, does anyone on earth buy the idea that Trump did that because he cares so much about Ukraine? It's so completely obvious. He could do 20 better things to punish Russia for their awful war in Ukraine. He's not doing them. He's doing the opposite. He's rolling out the red carpet. So those India tariffs were just a fig leaf, because he's mad about the trade imbalance between the U.S. and India, which, as today's guest just pointed out on Substack, and I'll bring him on in a minute if he's able to join, that trade imbalance was $46 billion in India's favor last year. So Trump extended his trade war from China, our mortal economic rival, over to India, which, despite Modi's authoritarian moves, is still a democracy, the world's largest democracy, and a natural ally for America in Asia and a hedge against China and Russia. But oh no, Trump has now sent Modi literally into the arms of China and Russia. And again, that's got to hurt. It's got to hurt that Trump had to do an interview with a Daily Caller in which he admitted that he got it completely wrong about how easy it would be to end the war in Ukraine. It's got to hurt that Donald Trump's tariffs are dragging him down so hard. Americans have completely rejected his trade war with the world, with independents saying by a margin of 42 points that they oppose Trump's tariff plan. It's got to hurt that Benjamin Netanyahu keeps ignoring Trump when he could easily end the war in Gaza, as today's guests suggested, in about 10 seconds. So that's the theme for today. There's a lot more we could talk about. Congress is back. There's a potential for a government shutdown looming. There's moves afoot on the Epstein files, and Americans overwhelmingly think the economy is awful, and hence Trump's approval rating is cratering. And we could talk about the redistricting wars, which are only getting hotter. And if people want to get into those issues, then chat live with us right here. Let us know. But today, I want to start off with focusing on the self-inflicted wounds that Trump has accumulated in the past 6 months around the world and how they're beginning to bleed. There are very few people with the breadth of understanding across all of them to help us connect those dots. But we've got one of them with us today, our returning guest, the former Middle East editor for the Associated Press, a veteran editor from locations around the world, the author of the outstanding Substack, Ask Questions Later, who I have successfully filibustered my way through this opening in order to give him a chance to join us. Dan Perry.
Hey, Matt.
Hey,
Still a few bugs in the system. I had to enable Safari and then Chrome to work the mic and the camera.
it's a fascinating modern world we live in, and we're grappling with it. And that's why you're here, is to grapple with the complications of the modern world. And that was a Senate level filibuster, even though I was a staffer for
I
four
watched
different
the
members of
end, and
Congress.
you did great. You could have gone
On the
on for
House side.
hours, even days.
Yes, I'm a House guy, not a Senate guy, but that was some Senate level filibustering. Dan,
It was.
you are fresh off of writing a really outstanding review piece on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the meeting that just unfolded over the weekend, which is going to be joined by our friends from North Korea shortly. So it truly will be an axis of rivals, leaders who represent more than a third of the population on Earth, not to mention a vast proportion of its landmass, all getting together. And collectively, I think you weren't quite on for this part of it yet, but collectively, and especially Narendra Modi, trying to send a strong signal of middle finger to Donald Trump, a signal of, we don't need you, thanks very much, but no thanks. We're going to get along quite well on our own. You wrote on your Substack, Ask Questions Later, a really wonderful review of this. Just take us through kind of the high points of what you saw in this meeting from your perch as one of the great observers of world affairs.
Well, China obviously is trying to present a bipolar world where they are co-equal to the U.S. and the Shanghai Cooperation Council, which grew out of the Shanghai Five, which was a very minimal thing from 30 years ago, is basically their device. Now, it wasn't most of the SCO's efforts in recent years were not worth covering, and
Mm,
so this event was hardly covered, and they didn't move the needle. But that was a mistake this year because on this particular year in 2025, the SCO did move the needle, and it did it in the following fashion. India, that has been forever claiming to be non-aligned because they are the world's largest. They were the world's largest democracy. Now they're simply the world's largest country. Um, because they surpassed China. They don't want to be part of any bloc. They resist being part of the Chinese bloc in some bipolar world, but they've been pushed in that direction. So this is one accomplishment that Trump has accomplished. You know, like he told you, we'll be winning so much that we'll be sick of winning. So here's one thing we won. We
yes,
pushed.
please stop the winning. Oh, good gravy,
No, no, I
please.
know, I know. It's like it's painful how much we're winning. So here's how much we won this week. We pushed the world's largest country with about 1.5 billion people and one of America's significant trading partners, with whom we don't even run that much of a deficit. It's like a small deficit with India, um, into the arms of China, but not just into the arms of China, into the arms of Putin and Erdogan and every other authoritarian miscreant who was there because that's what China is. So, in a normal world, China can have that zone, China can have that area code. If you are Aliyev of Azerbaijan, if you are Erdogan of Turkey, if you are any kind of despot or a tyrant, sure, you're aligned with China. And of course, the economy is controlled and the people have no rights, and that's who you are. India doesn't want to be that. We just pushed India in that direction with 50% tariffs. Now, I appeared on Indian TV, and they were, it's so adorable because they're befuddled. They're
Right.
like, we don't
Why
understand
won't
what's
you
going on.
friend me, Donald? Like, I thought we had a thing here, bro.
Uh,
It's
it,
it's really it's absolutely befuddling. By the way,
Matt,
let me just
Matt, if I was to translate like into regular people talk, what I was hearing from the panels I was on and the
okay.
interviewers who interviewed me, it would be, Dan, can it be that the U.S. is a banana republic where one man can just destroy everything at whim?
Yeah.
They find it hard to believe, but in their effort to project that that's not going down well with them, they're now basically in a Chinese camp. And so we see Modi and Xi and Putin and all these other ne'er do wells like yucking it up and hugging and kissing and driving in their limousines together. And that's a message to America, which is something I wrote about actually in the Hill about 4 months ago, which was, look, at some point the world's going to say, you know what, you want to go mad for 3 years, we're going to do our own no customs zone. Basically, no tariffs, no customs, no taxes, free trade. And that's going to include, by the way, Japan.
And can I just point out something that you wrote and asked questions later as part of that excellent review you did? And this is why I'm not just blowing smoke since you're here and we have the same tailor. I really do recommend that people, yeah, it's like we have the
No,
stylist.
please do anyway.
Yeah. I think these I recommend a limited number of Substacks because I really think they add a perspective that you don't get somewhere else. And one of the things you pointed out is that China and India have actually, in recent memory, been engaged in shooting wars. They have been engaged in conflicts where Indian soldiers have died. And it is off of that perspective. What Trump has done has so pushed Modi that Modi is willing to literally embrace his mortal enemy. Who could you imagine if you think about the last engagement where American soldiers, this would be like Donald Trump literally going and hugging the heads of the Taliban. This would be like giving the head of ISIS a kiss on the hand. That's essentially what Modi did. And so what he's really saying is, I am more interested. I'm so affronted by you, Donald Trump. I am more interested for the cameras in forging this relationship with China. That is the comparison here. It's really shocking in the context that you offered.
It really is. And by the way, with China, India actually runs a trade deficit that is stupendous. I mean, they have about $100 billion trade deficit. They export to China about 1/10 of what they import from China because China has not been willing to open its markets to India, essentially. So Trump is wrong in seeing a trade deficit as like an act of war and all that. But in the case of India and China, it really is extreme, and it maps onto, as you say, something akin to a military confrontation between these two countries over the past 2 decades. These are not countries that should be friendly. Now, for America, if America is rational, you may. No, I know. It's
Sorry,
always fun.
I thought you were doing a comedy routine
No,
there for a
it's
second.
always funny. I know. I don't mean to be comedic, but a rational America might make an enemy of China, might make an enemy of India, but not both together and push them together because together they have 3 billion people, which is 40% of the world's population. And of course, the Shanghai Cooperation Council has about 40 some percent of the world's population, about a third of the world's GDP by purchasing price power, and the idea that America doesn't mind alienating all these countries because we don't care about strategic alliances. We don't care about trade cooperation. We don't care about anything but some combination of a very tactical, short term bottom line based on the mania that if I buy from you, I'm losing from losing something, combined with who's nice to Trump, like who said something nice about Melania or who gave him a nice gift. This personalization of politics, this infantilization of politics, the idea, Matt, the idea that this is what's come of America is stunning. It really is. It is a wake up moment for people all over the world who cannot believe it. I mean, they can't believe it, and they're asking me, how can you explain it? Where will it lead? They're literally asking, what if Trump resigned and Vance became the president? Would it be this way? And here's something
That's
I
the
would put
question that people are asking you around the world.
absolutely, and I would ask you. I can tell you my question, my answer rather. Um, my answer is speculative, but it's this. The GOP was never my cup of tea because they don't seem to know that if you give every maniac a gun, you're going to have massacres. Like, I have troubles with the GOP. They seem to not know that, universal health care is a good idea, not communism, because every other democratic country has it, right? So, Medicare for all, I'm all in. And honestly, the cost issue is like a MacGuffin. But the GOP, the way it was, despite its confusion about many things in life, was not a force for radioactive stupidity. And Trumpism is. And my prediction is that if Trump were gone and JD Vance were president, we'd be back to the old GOP, which is just a little dopey, but not criminally stupid.
I
Am I
want to
wrong?
Well, I want to catch up to all of the people who have been joining us. Our numbers have been shooting up in the last 5 or 10 minutes, which means that you're on to saying something really interesting, Dan. Our guest here today is Dan Perry, the former Mideast editor. Do you like to lead with that? I mean, you've actually been a lead editor for the AP in several regions of the world, but I always lead with the Middle East because
I don't like the Middle East niche. I was the head of AP for Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and the
there it is.
Caribbean various times. So it
It's
depends.
just
If
a
we're talking
long
about
ass
the,
title. I'm trying to
I
condense it.
know if you talk about the Ukraine war, then the Europe Africa editor is more relevant. We talk about Israel,
Yeah.
Gaza. Obviously, that's more relevant.
All right, we'll
Uh,
switch you over. I'll switch over your appellage. Boy, I just worded a word there.
that is a
Um,
word.
yeah,
That is.
the AP would not approve of it. It's like the Gulf of Melania. So anyway, we're talking with Dan Perry
Oh, the
about.
Gulf of Melania is mine, by the
Oh
way.
yes, oh right,
That-
you laid claim to that. Um, that is Dan Perry. I'm Matt Robeson, a political analyst, a longtime congressional staffer, now relegated to the media. The pages of Newsweek, my Substack, worth knowing. It's worth knowing.substack.com. And we are here. So the question that's really driving people crazy, and I want to give a special shout out here to our frequent chatter, Lefty Gramps, who is apparently joining us. Did I catch your earlier chat correctly? You're on a kayak on a river, and this was at least as interesting as what you're seeing out in nature. So that's amazing. So you're posing the question of the hour that's been kind of rocketing around online circles over the last few days. Is Donald Trump still alive? And I think the answer is yes. He's ill. But so Dan, what you were just setting up there was you're getting legit questions now because people overseas, I mean, you're on TV. If people follow Ask Questions Later, they'll see your many TV appearances around the world. And you're telling me that you're getting asked serious questions now about what does the after Trump picture look like?
well, because the degree of absolute insanity that Trump represents, the diminution of America as a global brand, the irrationality that has descended upon geopolitics and global trade and much else is such that they ask themselves: is Trump sui generis? Is he unique? Is
Yeah.
he like something that will never come again, or is this the direction of travel in the U.S.? Now, to a degree, of course, it is a direction of travel because MAGA did not come out of nowhere. Trump kind of hijacked it, but he rode a tiger, but he rode it very well. Trump may be ignorant about tariffs and doesn't know how they work. Yes, but he's not ignorant about how to manipulate people. He's a genius in that regard, and he took MAGA, which he took that zone of American politics once the Tea Party, which should have been 20%, 25%, maybe of the American discourse, and he
Mm.
turned it into something that can win a presidential election somehow. I think if he's gone, not only will that change and return to its natural dimensions? But I think that is something that people like Vance will want because they're not all as. I don't think Trump is necessarily unpatriotic. He's clueless, but Vance is not clueless. And Vance, a few years ago, gave
Mm.
clear evidence that he understood who Trump is and what Trumpism is. My suspicion is that there will be a real effort on the part of the GOP to turn themselves into a party, to return themselves to being a party that is not at odds with the interests of the American people and the United States, which is what they
It's a
currently
really
are.
fascinating question. It really is because I mean, first of all, to the question that I think is rattling around people's minds, and that I set up a little bit in the intro there. I can't say for sure if Trump is ill. I suspect he's not, but I don't know. Does he have a deathly illness? I don't know. It would be cause for speculation. I don't see evidence yet. I believe in the Arthur C. Clarkeism. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I haven't seen evidence to this point that he's on death's door. So I await further news. Perhaps the reports of his death are greatly
Look,
exaggerated.
the guy's pushing 80, and in one form or another, we are all at death's door.
Right.
But is it imminent
Exactly.
for Trump? Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so, but I think what you're suggesting is, what is the future course of Republicans, and that is, I can understand why that's on the minds of our counterparts around the world.
Absolutely.
It's very much on our minds as well, and I was literally just exchanging texts with a friend of mine. He's another former congressional staffer who happens to be a Republican. He and I get along very well, despite some of our divergence in political views. And I was talking about the future of both parties. Now, look, upfront caveat here, I very much agree with what our guest 2 weeks ago, former DNC chairman Jamie Harrison, said on this show, which is, I'm not here to shit on Democrats. If you're here fighting other Democrats, you're part of the problem, not part of the solution. I do think that Democrats have problems to work through. We have challenges to work through. You saw them on display in the meeting that was just held over the past week. But I think that the path back for Democrats is actually a straighter line than it is for Republicans. If the scenario that you lay out, Dan, comes to pass somewhere in the near term, and J.D. Vance becomes president, he's going to have a long road to detoxify, to demogify the Trump Republican Party. He has had to embrace it. I think it is more of a cloak that he has put on than a real part of his identity. I don't know
I
what
agree.
his real identity is. He is chameleon like. He is whoever pays that piper calls the tune for JD Vance. So I don't know what his inner core beliefs are. I suspect that you're right, that he's more of a traditional Republican than a new MAGAfied, whatever the hell Trump is, Trumpist. But I don't really know. And if he were to embark on a program of trying to demogify the Republican Party, it would be like deprogramming a cult victim. It would be extremely challenging to
I
try
agree.
to crab walk their way off of the current base that they've assembled, the cult that they've assembled, toward traditional elements of the Republican coalition. It's possible, but I think it would be extremely challenging. So let me just turn this back to you, because that was me trying to weave a bunch of threads together here. Um, when you look at the questions you're getting around the world, the meeting that just occurred, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the failures and the growing evidence of the failures of the tariffs, the complete failure of Trump to effect an end to the war in Gaza, our various disasters that we have fomented around the world, both short term and, this is what the crux of what I'm getting to, long term, by our failure to provide aid, by the shuttering of USAID, by the active genocides occurring around the world that we're doing nothing to stop, by the inroads, literally, that China is making around the world because they're providing aid. At what point will the US have hit a tipping point under Trump where we're going to be sustaining permanent, unrecoverable damage that will take decades to unwind? Like, where is the line of no return? How will we see it?
I, listen, Matt, that's a great question. And honestly, my sense is that short of a cataclysmic event like the U.S. pulling out of NATO, for example, it's unlikely to happen.
Hmm.
Trump is death by a thousand cuts. He will degrade brand America stupendously. And many of the discussions I'm having with people in Europe and in Asia, where I spend most of my time, I'm off to a conference in Europe, two conferences in Europe in the coming weeks. The basic question is, can we wait it out? And one of my Indian interviewers said, "Look, but 3 years, assuming he lives, the damage will be stupendous."
Hmm.
But I know, and but I've lived long enough, sadly, to have seen this. 3 years seems like a long time, but the global market for an America that returns to its moral high ground and to its leadership position is so huge. The lust for it, the coveting of it, is so profound that If in 3 years' time we have a leadership in America that returns to rationality, they'll embrace it almost no matter what Trump did. I have to say, even if Trump pulls out of NATO, they'll have us back because America is the indispensable power. And the question is, can you dispense with it for 3, 4 years and somehow weather that storm? Um, Look at India. They're currently allying with Russia and China because they've been pushed in that direction by Trump. Do they want to be? They don't want to be. They feel they have a great cultural alliance with the American people. They would like things to return to the status quo ante. They don't want to be in the American camp, yes, because they have their own arrogance about their role in the world, but they want to be aligned with us, not with China, which is anathema to them ideologically in every way, and is a rival, as you mentioned, militarily in Asia. So I kind of think the damage Trump can do is mainly internal.
Fascinating.
Mainly
I mean,
internal.
I really I agree with that. Obviously, I'm more of a domestic policy guy than a foreign policy guy, which is why I like having
Well,
you
think
on
about
for
that. By the way,
all
I have
these
a
things.
point to make. Can I just say one
Go,
thing?
go, please.
The tariffs, the tariffs are bullshit. Okay, I'm sorry to use a seven, an eight-letter word, but the
No, no, no,
tariffs.
no. We're Democrats and people who are anti-Trump are supposed to be cursing more. We covered that last week.
Right? So
More
they're a
cursing is
serious
good.
bullshit. But the amazing thing is that Trump has somehow gotten away with this shadow tax on the American people, and they continually message this outrage as if it was a punishment on India, which it is because it does harm their exports to the U.S. that India pays for. That it is not. The tariffs are paid for either by American companies that absorb the losses because they got to pay this tax, or by the American consumer because the American importers will pass it on to the consumer. It's one or the other. Either way, the taxes are harming the American economy. So when Trump says we have all this revenue from tariffs, anyone who believes him is an idiot or an ignoramus.
I
It's one
I
or the
want to
other.
put a pin in tariffs though.
Hold on. Just if
Oh
I
yeah,
could, just one quick thing.
yeah.
The president can't do this. That's why I say it's internal. It's domestic politics. The only way the president can mess with international trade this way, and this is by a fairly recent amendment to the law, is if there's a national emergency. Now, the Liberation Day tariffs apply to pretty much every country and every import. So the proposition at hand is that we have a national emergency vis-a-vis every country and every industry. That is obviously ridiculous. And so the federal appeals court struck this down just last week. It will go to the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court, with a straight face, validates the Trumpian view that, yeah, we have a national security emergency in every instance of trade. When we buy bananas from whatever, that's a national emergency. So everything's got to be tariffed. This is a lie. And if the Supreme Court validates this transparent lie, they are making a mockery of America. And, I remember a line from The Godfather, part two, where this guy says that he's being made to look ridiculous, and a man in my position cannot
Well, that's
afford
part
to look.
one. That's part one.
No, man, it was
I'm
part
not.
two. I'll
No, I'm
bet you.
not going to correct you. No,
All right.
that's the studio head. That's right before the horse's
Cannot
head shows up.
afford to look ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
They're making America look ridiculous, and it's about more than China and India getting together. It's about, is America ridiculous? And if the Supreme Court doesn't back up the lower federal court in trashing these criminally misguided Trump tariffs, America will not only look ridiculous, it will be ridiculous. And there's a price to be paid because America really is. And I say this as an American who's lived all over the world, man, all over the world, in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, and in Europe. And I know how important America is to people, man. In the post World War II order, America's value to the world is hard to exaggerate. And they're watching us implode. And the implosion will affect not only us, but the rest of the world. And so the Supreme Court, and I know these are lemmings who have been appointed by Republicans and mainly by Trump, and that is a calamity that happened for a lot of reasons, including well, I mean, Ruth Ginsburg, but it happened, and they got to get over themselves and make a statement. And to me, the most important thing in coming months will be if the Supreme Court does what it has to with the tariffs. It's odd because it sounds like a nuanced issue and a trade issue. It's actually pretty simple. If they don't strike this down, and the world is watching, brand America will be harmed so badly that it will be hard to recover for years.
All right, let me read this back to you. And instead of putting a pin in tariffs, I'm going to pop the balloon on tariffs. I was going to go to Israel. Because the jumping off point for that question was, at what point do we cross the tipping point? I just used the word point like 3 times in one sentence there, so that's repetitively redundant. At what point do we cross the Rubicon to unrecoverable damage? And I was going to pose the same question to you about Israel. So I'm going to let that hang because we were getting some comments there in the chats from people talking about the Israel question. This is obviously very close to your heart. I am going to now put a pin in that because I do think, and it seems like the interest in the chat is going over toward the point that you were just raising, which is the ridiculousness quotient. And I hear you saying two things. One is there is a brand damage that the U.S. can inflict on itself, but you're arguing that it's recoverable. You're arguing that there's such a reservoir of decades and decades of accumulated goodwill and positive image around the world, partly because of our cultural heft, partly because of our economic heft, partly because we have been a shield for so many countries.
Also because of need. Also because of need.
Because of need. So we have built up decades and decades of goodwill. So we have a little bit of room to maneuver there, although maybe not that much, because there are certainly countries that are on the edge. I was going to say the bleeding edge, but that was a little too on the nose, because there are countries that are suffering where we have cut off the aid that we were giving that was costing us half a penny on the dollar of our tax dollars, and it may be permanently damaging our brand there already. Okay, fair enough. But the other side of the coin of what I hear you saying is the internal damage. And to me, the foundational error, the original sin, since in the chats we're talking about, got Bobby Douglas mentioning the celebration of Jesus, which I think is very spot on, because of the looming economic disaster that we're facing up to. In essence, what I hear you arguing is we had this original sin about a year ago where the Supreme Court said Trump is immune from prosecution. He is functionally, I know they made niceties about like, well, for official actions. Every action is fucking official, okay, when you're the president. And Kim Whaley, the legal scholar, who I'm trying to drag back onto the show, multi-time guest before, widely known legal correspondent, has made the point and wrote a whole book about the fact that it's the twin superpower of having total immunity from prosecution and the pardon power that really makes Trump invulnerable, because in the course of that Supreme Court ruling, what they essentially did was they reinforced the fact that the president's pardon power is virtually untrammeled. So what he can now do is he can undertake any action personally that he sees fit, and he's immune from prosecution, and he can have his underlings do any action that he sees fit and pardon them or promise them a pardon later. Either way, he is above the law now. So to me, that was the original sin. That's the part that's unrecoverable. That's the part where we've already crossed the tipping point. Now, what people are pointing out in the chat right now is all the economic damage that we're absorbing right now. I want to point, I'm going to put up one chart to this, since people are making very, very similar points. I think that this was Bobby Douglas's point about the economic impact. People have been saying, gee, we're not seeing inflation blow up because of the tariffs. We actually are. Inflation is up. Prices are up substantially on imported goods. That's that dotted red line here.
Well, and there's a lag. There's always going to be a lag.
Well, there's both a lag, and there's a difference here. Now, the reason we're not seeing widespread and really major inflation from the tariffs is that imported goods are only about 10% of the economy. So it's going to have a slightly muted impact. But the point is, there is an impact here. And so I'm less, I mean, as painful as this is, I don't think that's an unrecoverable thing. What I think is unrecoverable is the legal side of it. It's, and what you were just leading up to is if the Supreme Court now says, yes, Donald Trump's declaration that he has emergency powers to impose these tariffs, if they bless that, that's another, we have the original sin, pardon power, immunity from prosecution. And then we have the next sin, which would be, and he's in total control of the economy. That would be extremely frightening. And I'm
Uh,
picking up a thread of that from what you're picking up abroad
uh,
as well.
I basically think it would be validating a lie. We do not have a national emergency with every vis-a-vis every country on earth and vis-a-vis every case of imports. We just don't. And if they go ahead and validate that, they're saying 2 + 2 is 5. If the U.S. stands for 2 + 2 is 5, that will have downstream consequences that are hard to predict but are not going to be good. And the U.S. is watching this and saying, is America really now a bullshit country? Like the world is full of bullshit countries. I'm not going to
And
say
then there's
shit.
VD Hertz's comment here, which I have up on the screen, which goes right in line with what you're saying, is the damage is the international community not trusting the next election. That's another
Absolutely.
major issue is
Well, a
democracy
bullshit
promotion,
country holds bullshit elections.
right?
And they can falsify and they can make ridiculous claims and they can maybe not hold an election. I mean, consider that. The idea, I believe no American election in history has never not been held on time. We're now wondering whether, in this new America that MAGA is building for us, where, bullshit walks and talks at the same time, maybe that'll happen. Who knows? And by the way, there's a global movement towards countries that are fake democracies because they hold elections, they manipulate those elections, they create a majority that is partly false but partly true, and then they enact a dictatorship of the majority. But that is not democracy. Democracy says if the majority, real democracy, if there's a majority elected government and that government says anyone named Matt Robeson must die, well, no. There are ways
It's
to prevent that.
my
But in the
forebears were part
bullshit,
of a government like that when they lived in Russia 100 years
yes,
ago. They actually
yes.
said that
No,
about
that
my
one was,
grandmother.
dude. That one wasn't elected. It
Well, it
wasn't
wasn't
elected.
elected.
We
Yeah,
now have elected governments that
yeah.
seek tyrannical powers. You have that in Russia, although they've now started falsifying elections. You have it in Turkey. You have it in many countries, and basically it's about liberal democracy versus dictatorship of the majority. Americans get confused about liberal democracy because the word liberal in there sounds like it's far left, but a liberal democracy is not far left. In most of the world, liberal actually means right, and that's complex. We'll put that aside. A liberal democracy doesn't allow a majority to do whatever the hell it wants. And that is what Trump is trying to turn America into. And a country that behaves that way will be poorer, less respected, and ultimately weaker. And Americans have to decide. So, you know what? If the Republican Party doesn't disabuse itself of this incredibly damaging mutation that has taken it over, and if, God forbid, in that state they win more elections, America will be massively degraded, massively. And you know what? There may be some people in the country that don't care. I'm here to tell them that the tax on that is high. It's like 30 cents on the dollar for the next decade. And it's 60 cents on a dollar 20 years from now. And before you know it, you're no longer a world power. And that is what happened to a whole bunch of empires in the past. That's what happened to the Soviet Union. Russia is now an impoverished country. Does America want that? Because freedom got us a long way. And the Republican Party used to stand for freedom, maybe too much freedom. The idea that the government doesn't have to do anything, like give you a first grade education. They overdid freedom, but if nothing else, they stood for freedom. Right now, they're standing for tyranny, and that's a bad look, and it's probably going to lead to a bad outcome if they stick with it. And again, God forbid, they succeed. That's where things are headed, and the world that is less ignorant about history than America is. In America, we have been insulated from history. We have two oceans on either side, and the world is far away. And we have all these natural resources. And you know what? You get along just dealing with America and forgetting about the world, and the world's going to seem a joke. The rest of the world actually pays attention to history, and they
I
know what we're saying, and they're watching us with horror.
I think it's really worth picking up on that thread and something you said a moment ago, which is, um, will we be able to kind of limp along on the afterglow of our achievements of decades past and with our banked goodwill around the world and our legacy strength of our economy? In all likelihood, yes. In all likelihood, yes.
For
And I
what?
wrote about this in Newsweek a couple months ago. You and I both graced the pages of Newsweek.
We do.
And my argument was actually much more about kind of reinvigorating our economic dynamism than about our international relations. But the same point holds. If
Well,
you
they're
think back,
related. They're
if you think
related.
back to the example of Rome, after Alaric and the Visigoths sacked Rome in 410, the Roman Empire didn't really fall, it relocated. The afterglow of the Roman Empire persisted for another 1,000 years. And it wasn't because they were really dynamically building, they were relocated to Byzantium. And, it was the Eastern Roman Empire. And we still have echoes of everything that they did 2,000 years ago in what we do today. If you want to make something more sophisticated, arcane, and belong to essentially a guild of highly trained professionals, you translate it into Latin. Why? Because that's the dead language of the Romans, right? When the Pope ascended to the throne of St. Peter, the ceremony was in the language, the long dead language of Rome. The point is, we could have an American afterglow that lasts for decades because of the achievements of, I'm not going to try and like sprain a shoulder patting ourselves on the back, but our generation, earlier generations. But
Yeah.
whether we've crossed a line here where we've sent ourselves into a death spiral, again, I'm not sure. I agree with the points people are making. MJ is making this point in the chats. I'm a little behind in the chats about the pain that we're absorbing right now in the economy. That's very real. I think it's recoverable. I think we have a path back from that. What I'm more worried about is the legal precedents that are going to be so hard to unwind, and the process of whether there can ever be a sane Republican Party that recovers again after the reality of Trump. Let me diverge into where we had put a pin earlier. I pressed you with the question of, when do you cross the Rubicon? See what I did there in the Roman Empire shout out? When do we
Very,
cross
very
the Rubicon
elegant.
in America?
Very elegant. I noticed.
Thank you. I didn't even know I was doing that. Same question to you about Israel, because this is coming up in the chats, and you wrote very compellingly on Ask Questions Later on Substack, which everyone should subscribe to, and I'm going to put that info right up here on the screen right now. You wrote that Trump could end the war in Gaza in 10 seconds with one phone call. What did you mean?
That he could end the war in 10 seconds with one phone call. Basically, Israel can't continue the war without U.S. backing. Israel relies on U.S. munitions, and Israel relies on a U.S. Diplomatic cover at the UN Security Council, without which they'd be facing potentially economic sanctions and tremendous world pressure. So I'm not necessarily advising that he blackmail Israel that way, but I'm saying he could. He certainly should do more. He should do more to make sure that Israel is prosecuting the war in a way that is rational and is aimed at not a forever war, but at a solution. Uh, I'm not in any way starry-eyed about an outcome that leaves Hamas in power in Gaza. That would be terrible for the Palestinians. Hamas is a jihadist mafia that wants Palestinians to die in a forever war with Israel. Hamas really sucks. But the Israeli government also kind of sucks because they have a right wing contingent that wants the war to last forever, that wants to expel the Gazans from the territory and settle the territory of Jews. That's not Israel's policy, but that is what the right wing nuts in Israel want. And the outcome of all this is that Netanyahu can't do a day after plan. There's an obvious day after plan to be put on the table that would nudge Hamas out of power. We know what it would take, and Israel has to just agree to do it. And Netanyahu won't because his coalition won't allow him. But if the U.S. puts its foot down, then that could change. By which I mean that the U.S. should back a plan to end the war, return Israeli hostages, and attempt to free the people of Gaza of Hamas by basically conditioning the recondition of Gaza on the disarming and removal of Hamas, what's left of Hamas. And there should be a massive plan on the table, which there is. It's waiting to happen. $100 billion, essentially in escrow, to rebuild Gaza exists in Saudi Arabia and the UAE and the Persian Gulf countries, but it's all dependent on disarming Hamas. So it's not so simple because that does have to happen, and the question is how you compel it to happen. I have no confidence that another 3 years of Israel fighting door to door in Gaza will make it happen because you know what? Israel's very powerful, but America's more powerful, and we see what happened to America in Iraq and in Afghanistan. That is a recipe for nonstop insurgency and a never-ending damage to civilian life in Gaza, and probably sacrifices all the Israeli hostages. And I can tell you, about 80% of the people of Israel oppose it. So Netanyahu right now, to preserve his coalition, is following a escalated war strategy, which, if it is not a bluff to get Hamas to relent, which it might be, if they're serious and they go in, that is absolutely opposed by most of the people in Israel, and in my view is dead wrong and will lead to nonstop calamity. Now I know that Trump hates forever wars. That's why he basically gave in to the Taliban in Afghanistan. People think Biden ran away, but actually he was implementing the Trump capitulation to the Taliban in Afghanistan, and they all hoped it would have gone better, and it didn't. Trump hates forever wars. He wants Nobel Prizes. He wants the war to be over. If he wants the war to be over, he has to man up and focus for a second and have a cheeseburger and then like pick up the phone and call Bibi and say we're going to work on ending this war and yeah, removing Hamas, but in a more clever way. And we're
I
going to do
want
this.
to I want to do two things. First of all, I can no longer ignore what's going on here per the Cynthia Rice. Look, I was trying to be where is this comment here? I was trying to be level-headed. I was trying to be non-conspiratorial. And so I said at the top and repeated in our discussion a few minutes ago that I don't believe that Donald Trump is deathly ill. And the White House had promised he was going to be brought out publicly in a press conference happening right now. And it's not within my bandwidth to talk to you, listen to all of the rich, interesting things you're saying, read the chats, put them up on the screen, and think about what I'm going to say next all at the same time. I can't do all of that and also monitor what's going on with the press conference. So that's why I appreciate the Cynthia Rice letting us all know that no press will be allowed in the Oval for Trump's presser. So here's what I want to do. I want to go full conspiracy theory mode and talk about that in a minute. But let's just round out the conversation about Israel for just a moment, because this is one of the massive self-inflicted wounds, foreign policy failures that we did promise we were going to talk about in the course of the show. And you said a lot of important things in that. And it really does connect to what people are saying here in the commentary, which is there are people who are very, very frustrated with AIPAC and against the work of AIPAC here in the U.S., but who are going out of their way. And I want to pull these comments up, but they were a little while ago, so I can't quite locate them right now. But what they're saying at the same time is, look, I'm with the people of Israel. I'm just against their government and the horrible things that they're doing in Gaza. And that is such a precious thing, because the best assets that Israel had for many years, there were two. One was known as the QME, the qualitative military edge, the fact that the quality of their weaponry was superior to the quality of their enemy's weaponry. And they had things like sophisticated,
well, also their personnel,
laser targeting, night vision, and better training. So they had a qualitative military edge. The other thing they had was unassailable American backing, which was based on strong public opinion. It was politically impossible for politicians of either party, either major party in the US, to not be friendly toward Israel. That's the so the question that it leads to back to you is, when does Netanyahu drag Israel past that unrecoverable point where he's so damaged that reservoir of goodwill with the American people that it's unrecoverable and he's permanently damaged the
Look,
state of Israel?
and Netanyahu is brilliant at taking a grain of truth in his narrative, and that maybe is worth 10%, and making it appear to be worth 90%. So he has a grain of truth, man. Hamas is a blight upon the universe, and to leave them in charge in Gaza is not a great idea. Does that mean that what they're doing is the right way? No, it does not. So at some point, yeah, it'll reach a level where Israel has caused so much damage in Gaza that it may be unrecoverable. But I think, as with Trump, I may have to disappoint you here and tell you that is a way down the line. Um, well before that happens, we'll have another clarifying moment. The Israelis go to elections at worst in about a year. Elections have to be held in October 2026. I think Israel can actually survive diplomatically in the world, and it's difficult and it's ugly and it's terrible. But because their enemy is Hamas, and because really all their critics, including the Arabs, want
Mm,
Hamas to be gone, that clouds the issue. What issue does it cloud? I'm telling you, the Israeli government is vile, but their enemy is more vile. And therefore, you have fuzziness. The real breaking point for Israel in public opinion in the West is if the right religious coalition wins that next election. If that happens, if that happens, and that validates, for example, Netanyahu's effort to Putinize Israel and turn it
mm,
into an illiberal democracy, which is a dictatorship of the majority, which will turn against the Arabs of Israel, the citizen Arabs of Israel. All these horrible things will happen if Netanyahu's cabal win that next election in the year. That's the moment. If that happens, you will see a tremendous coast to coast international wave of angst that will translate into a re envisioning of their view of Israel. And Israel, despite the differences, because it's not analogous and it's not about racism, despite all that, it will increasingly be put in the area code of apartheid South Africa if Netanyahu wins that next election. So it's not so much about the war, because as regards the war, ugly though it may be, he has the card to play, which is I can't leave Hamas in charge there. And that card is not invalid. But if he wins that next election, knowing what we know about him and where he wants to take Israel, and what the right wing coalitions, the right religious coalitions view is of what should be done with the Palestinians, which for the radicals among them is exile, that will put Israel at loggerheads with the entire democratic world. Maybe not with Trump, but I do believe what follows Trump will be different. Even if it's JD Vance or some other MAGA, half of MAGA is fed up with Israel too. The Tucker Carlson crowd, Megyn Kelly of late. Uh, it will not end well for Israel if these people stay in power. I have to say, these people who, from the perspective of the old school Zionists, who are rational and patriotic, who are traitors. Uh, there are people in Israel who believe the Bibi crowd is traitors in a way that is somewhat analogous to how many people in America would say the MAGA crowd, and Trump for sure, is a traitor. Anti American, anti patriotic, bad for the country and bad for the world. And it all attaches to a global authoritarian cabal of corrupt miscreants whose current global leader, by the way, is Putin. But Putin is allied with Trump. This is the great paradox of our moment. It's horrifying to contemplate. It's unbelievable to it's almost impossible to accept. But that is where we are, and that's why the Israel issue is so emotive to Americans, because actually, if you view it correctly, it comes right back around to attach to an American issue.
mm.
If this is the Israel that happens, then that's kind of the America that might happen, and they're both very bad for people who are rational patriots.
I want to go ahead and congratulate myself because not only did I manage to just listen to the answer you just gave, but I also managed to simultaneously process what people are updating me on because I can't also be watching X, Twitter, while I do this. I managed to process all of the fascinating information that people are sharing. So I'm going to go ahead and give the people what they want. I think we should spend a few minutes talking about what the fuck is happening to Donald Trump right now. I can't. I'm sucked in. I'm officially sucked into this year. The thing that is trending on Twitter right now is Trump is dead. 28,000 posts, 739,000 posts trending with the president. And I've even got a screenshot that I've prepared here that I'm going to try and share with everyone right now. Because what people are basically saying is this guy does not look well. Now, you could have said that at any point in the last 10 years. Trump is obviously very, very unwell, but they're pointing out that he's swollen. His hair is mussed. Oh, I like MJ's formulation of this. I don't want to repeat what these Cynthia Rice just said, but I'm going to go ahead and put this up on the screen because it's just too good. It's so all right. There we go. We have managed it. We have talked a little bit about the fact that Trump really looks sick. Now, I want to just do a moment on this. Republicans just finished a massive blow up of Joe Biden. Oh, Joe Biden, he wasn't well. He wasn't fully with it at the end of his presidency. Over the weekend on Truth Social, Trump was joking about the fact that when he does his monstrosity of an expansion to the White House with his gilded whatever wing, he's going to have a hall of images of presidents. He was going to put an auto pen for Joe Biden up there. Good one, Donald. We get it. See what you're
Pretty
doing
funny.
there. Very, very funny. I can't imagine how the world will react if it turns out. I mean, is it possible, Dan? You're a veteran journalist. Is it possible that the White House isn't being fully forthcoming with us all right now about the health of the president of the United States? I mean,
Are you kidding?
is that
Wait,
possible?
is it possible that politicians lie to journalists?
I've, I've never. Let me ask you a question.
Look,
When you cover press conferences, or
I
when
hate to
you
say it.
were assigning reporters, like how did you deal with them when politicians would bullshit them? I will tell
They're
you that I got screamed at by editors. Mike Resendiz, the head of the Boston Globe Spotlight team, okay, they uncovered the Catholic Church sex abuse scandal, right? The whole movie, the whole Academy Award winning movie. He was investigating a congressman that I was working for a few years ago. I used to have to get on the phone with this guy. There was a certain amount of shit up with which he would not put. So, how did you deal with non-forthcoming political flacks
look. I
and
mean,
politicians?
you don't do deals with them. You call them to account. You correct what they say. But at the end of the day, politicians are allowed to lie, and the consequences are going to be exacted upon them, not by journalists, but by their voters. The real problem that America faces is we have a lying leadership whose electoral base seems not to care.
Mm,
That is a sickness in society. And I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, but there is like a disease in the American body politic where people don't care that they know he's lying. So for journalism, you basically have to constantly pound away at the facts and maintain, by the way, your credibility that they should listen to you when you say, well, 2 + 2 is 4, not 5, by not seeming hysterical and opposed to the liar by definition. Uh, it's very tricky, because when the truth becomes a political position, which is what has happened here, uh, the truth tellers are seen as politicians, and if politicians are all not to be trusted, then neither are the truth tellers. In this case, the journalists, ideally. Never in American history has it been quite this profound, but in global history, it has, and we see where that takes us. And people like me, we implore the American voter to look at history and understand what happens when bullshit becomes the currency. It may seem like it's clever to get all the eggheads all upset because nows are not capitalized, and the guy insists on capitalizing country. And it may be very funny if professors are against you because they're all woke anyway or something. It's not funny when a whole society is based on a premise that 2 + 2 is 5. That ends badly. And journalism has no choice but to insist that 2 + 2 is 4, even if that makes them look political. And that's the crazy reality we're in. And in America, despite many problematic American presidents in the past, not just Nixon that our generation knows, but from before, of course, there's never been anything like this. Trump has managed to tap into the dark side of society and to maximize its impact in a manner that is without precedent. And he has a talent for doing it that I've rarely seen in the world. I've seen bullshit artists mobilize public opinion in many countries, but never quite like Trump. By the way, you mentioned Israel, and a lot of the audience cares about Israel. Netanyahu has a bit of that. But Netanyahu is different because he's actually supremely intelligent and he's an intellectual.
Mm.
And so he doesn't say 2 + 2 is 5. He says he puts it differently. He says 2 + 2 is 4, but it's not the 4 you think it is. He's different.
I
I've never seen anything like Trump, basically, and I have to think that when he's gone, we will be fixed.
again, I don't want to. I mean, I'm kind of playing along, but I think people are making a real point here that there is something super suspicious about all of this. There is not a
Oh, about
world.
Trump being sick and being at death's door?
Yeah, there is.
Maybe.
There's something.
You
I
saw his
mean,
hand? His hand looks very, very bad. I've seen medical speculation about what that might be, that he's on all kinds of treatments. Uh, but you know what? Honestly, I mean, of course, presidents should be transparent about their health, but even less offensive presidents have been cagey about it. And you know what? I mean, let me ask you a more difficult question. Do you
please.
wish it? Do you wish him many more years of health?
I long ago decided that I um I don't ever seek revenge or retribution because I believe in the karma of the universe. I believe in the arc of the moral universe. I truly do. It's never worth my time and energy and attention to wish ill on other human beings because I do firmly believe that in the long run, that has a way of taking care of itself. You can call it God, you can call it karma, you can call it
Well, for the
whatever.
person, but think of the implications of what I'm saying. And I don't want to wish Trump ill health. That's not the person I am. But I am saying he's doing unique damage to the country that I think would end if he were gone. So, you know what? I don't have it in me to wish him ill health, but I do understand that my assessment of the damage he's doing would make others wish for that. I can see that very clearly.
Right. And my wishes aside, and all joking aside, I'm being a little bit light about this because it's fun. And we should have some fun in this world still, somehow. But this is deadly serious. I mean, the reason that they're making the jokes about Biden and the auto pen is they're trying to illegitimize his executive orders, his pardons, his
That's
official
terrible.
actions as
It's
president. And
terrible.
it very much with a president who is ruling by fiat through executive orders and findings of emergency authority to do all kinds of things that clearly neither the Constitution nor the Congress of the United States has explicitly authorized, and he has no legal authority to do so, it's actually worth questioning if, as is being suggested by here, for example, is a chat from Amethyst Peony, one of our favorite chatters, suggesting that a doctor is, speculating here, clearly speculating, but saying, well, he could have had a stroke. The reason for his puffy appearance is that he's on a statin and another cholesterol drug. It's possible that he's on steroids. I mean, if that is the case, then yes, it is absolutely worth questioning what is his cognitive capacity and what
Sure it is.
authority does he retain to be able to make all of these executive orders,
But,
all
but,
of these.
but you know what? I'm saying you're not going to know. They're not going to come clean. And I'm saying something even worse. Yeah, he's usurped powers from the U.S. Congress, but he's somehow created a situation, despite how dopey we think he has a genius in him politically. He's created a situation where even if he's taking usurping powers that are beyond the law and that require the validation of Congress, well, the lemmings in a Supreme Court will validate it, and the lemmings in Congress will hand over the powers. And the American people are responsible for this basically because they elected these congressmen. So we have a bigger problem. We have two branches of the government that are lying prostrate and handing over executive power to where it shouldn't lie, and they're doing so willingly. So or at least appear to be, and so far have. I'm allowing myself to be somewhat optimistic that SCOTUS, when faced with the obvious bullshit of the tariffs, and you may say it's not that big a deal economically, I think it kind of is, will rebel. And there's a point where public opinion plays a factor
Well,
because
that is
all this
true.
stuff is
John
not
Robert,
popular.
yes, he's made that very, very clear. He's made that very, very clear that there is such a thing as the weight of public opinion and being inside versus outside, sort of that penumbra of
Yeah.
what is accepted, public views on society and culture, not necessarily on law. That's his job. But I think you have a point. I think that is a great aspirational thing to wish for. To the point that VD Hertz was making, I see your argument that it's a little bit of a disconnect to not wish Trump ill. I'm just saying I don't wish any human being ill. I don't wish him well either.
I'm
It's not
glad
like
you didn't. I'm glad you didn't call me naive about SCOTUS, although you hinted at it, but you didn't actually
aspirational.
say.
Aspirational.
You
That's
called me aspirational.
I am
Yes.
one of the bawds of euphony, as Wallace Stevens would have had it.
My man, Matt, I'm gonna have to probably say goodbye
Yeah, I
very
was
shortly.
about to usher you off the stage. I'm not inviting you to leave. I'm booting you off, man. This has been invaluable insight from.
That's I'm going to try not to be offended.
Yeah, well, to make it up to you for booting you off, I'm going to pump up your Substack, which is invaluable. It really is. There are very few really informed things you can read. I mean, Gary Kasparov's is one of them. I highly recommend his. It's
That's the one.
excellent. Tim Snyder, the Yale professor, also very, very useful. But yours is the most comprehensive. It covers what's going on from an international perspective, and it brings information. I'm telling you, I am a subscriber to the New York Times that I don't get in the New York Times, and it's perspective and insight from the conversations that you're having with your sources, with the people you're embedded with, and as a guest on TV around the world. So it's an invaluable resource. Ask questions later. I hope people will subscribe to it. And with that, I'm going to unceremoniously boot you off, which is a mitzvah for you because I know you have places to go, people to see,
Can I just
shows
say
to
one
hear.
thing?
Please.
I want to turn that back around and praise your Substack and basically do more than that and underscore that as someone who worked in a mainstream media for a quarter century, I'm seeing a complete transition into something else. When Jen Rubin left the Jeff Bezos Washington Post, she took with her 500,000 subscribers because they figured out something I've always known. When I would read the New York Times, it was basically to read three or four commentators that I loved. It was not the 2,000 staffers. that do news that is a little bit commoditized. Actual analysis and commentary is atomized right now, and it's down to individual people who create ecosystems around them who are more valuable brands than the mainstream media that is so discredited. And that is you, Matt. And that is Gary Kasparov. And that is many people. To a certain degree, relevant journalism right now is on Substack and a few other platforms, but I think this one is the best for a whole bunch of reasons. Uh, I think we have to find a way to amplify that message to the audience. That if they want great journalism and sophisticated commentary, they no longer need to go to these old world brands that have become vastly corrupted for a whole number of reasons that we can discuss in a subsequent appearance. And it may not be you or me, but others on Substack and others on what are mistakenly viewed as blog platforms are probably the way to go.
Well, I very much agree with you. And this is a rich conversation that we've been having offline and that we should continue to have both here and offline about the value proposition that we bring. And look, both you and I recognize that we've done, we hope, important work in our domains that we're trying to bring with our perspectives to Substack and to live streams like this. We're not the biggest names on earth. You should be. Me, but we're trying to do that. But we are also in an ecosystem where there are some huge names coming in, and they're great, and I subscribe to them too. But it is hard, and Substack is becoming a place where it is hard to get eyeballs and earballs. And so we are very actively thinking about what are the best ways to get people valuable insights that we think we bring, we think are unique, and to not get too crowded out by all of the volume that's out there. So that is something that will be continued. I will commend to everyone, ask questions later. And also the question, please weigh in with me, get on the chat with me, get on my Substack chat, worthknowing.substack.com. Let me know what you think. I'm very much thinking about launching a new dedicated show to bring the kinds of information and news that maybe you're not seeing above the fold covered in the legacy media with people like Dan. So let me know what you think about that. And with that, we really, really should let Dan go. So thank you very much, everyone, for being in the chats, for being part of the show today. We will see you next week with another outstanding guest. Stay safe, be well, and let's hope that the arc of the moral universe speeds up and stops taking its sweet time. See you next week.